Once upon a time, I said, adjusting the blanket around my 5-year-old daughter Lily, there was a brave little princess who lived in a castle with her daddy. What about Mommy? Lily asked, her green eyes wide in the soft glow of her nightlight. Good question, kiddo. What about Mommy indeed? Mommy was out fighting dragons, I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Sarah was definitely out there slaying something, though I suspected it had more to do with her book club that never seemed to involve actual books. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Ethan Cole, and 3 months ago I thought I had it all figured out. 36 years old, ex-Marine sniper turned private security consultant, living in a comfortable suburban home in Millfield, Massachusetts, with my wife Sarah and our daughter. The American dream, right down to the white picket fence and the golden retriever we'd been promising Lily for her 6th birthday. But dreams have a way of turning into nightmares when you're not paying attention. Daddy, why do you look sad? Lily touched my cheek with her small hand. I'm not sad, sweetheart, just thinking. I kissed her forehead. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, the princess and her daddy were having a grand adventure. As I spun tales of castles and quests, my mind wandered to the real story unfolding in my house. The story of credit card charges I didn't recognize. Late-night phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The faint smell of cologne on Sarah's clothes that definitely wasn't mine. Something expensive and cloying that made my nose wrinkle. Sarah had been at book club again tonight. 3rd time this week. Either they were reading War and Peace at lightning speed, or my wife of 8 years was lying to me. I'd survived 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'd crawled through desert sand with enemy snipers hunting me. I'd made split-second decisions that meant the difference between my squad coming home or coming home in boxes. But somehow, I'd missed the signs that my own wife was planning her escape route. And they lived happily ever after, I finished, though the words tasted like ash in my mouth. Will we live happily ever after, Daddy? The question hit me like a sniper's bullet to the chest. I hope so, Princess, I really hope so. I tucked her in, turned on her nightlight shaped like a butterfly, and closed her door softly. The house felt different when it was just me and Lily. Peaceful. Honest. No performance required. I made my way to the kitchen and grabbed a beer from the fridge. The house was too quiet, filled with the kind of silence that screams at you. I'd learned to read silence in the military. It could mean safety, or it could mean you were about to get your head blown off. This silence felt like the latter. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. Running late. Don't wait up. XOXO. XOXO. She used to write that on little notes she'd leave in my lunch when I worked construction before I started my security consulting business. Back when we actually talked to each other instead of exchanging polite pleasantries like strangers sharing an elevator. I walked into my home office, a converted garage space where I ran my security consulting business. 3 monitors, high-end computer equipment, and enough surveillance gear to make the NSA jealous. Occupational hazard of the security business. You learn not to trust easily. But apparently, I'd trusted too easily where it mattered most. I sat in my chair and stared at the family photo on my desk. Sarah, Lily, and me at the beach last summer. Sarah's smile looked genuine then. When had it become a mask? My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Sarah. Hey buddy, you awake? The text was from Jake Morrison, my old Marine buddy who now ran a private investigation business in Boston. I called him back. What's up, Jake? Can't sleep. Too much coffee. You sound like hell, though. Everything okay? Jake had been my spotter in Afghanistan. We'd spent countless hours in hide sites, talking in whispers about everything and nothing. He knew me better than anyone, sometimes better than I knew myself. Define okay, I said. Ah, shit. Sarah? Maybe. Probably. Hell, I don't know. I rubbed my eyes. She's been acting strange, distant, secretive. Want me to look into it? That was Jake, straight to the point. No judgment, no lectures about trust and communication. Just practical solutions to practical problems. I don't know if I'm ready for what you might find. Brother, you survived Fallujah. You can survive whatever suburban bullshit your wife is cooking up. I laughed, despite myself. When you put it that way, give me a couple days. I'll be discreet. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of suburban evening, dogs barking, cars passing, the hum of air conditioners. Normal life continuing while mine potentially fell apart. I'd been trained to gather intelligence before making any moves, never act on assumptions, verify your target, know your enemy. The problem was, I'd never imagined my enemy might be sleeping in my bed. 2 days later, Jake called with news I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. We need to meet, he said, not over the phone. We met at the Drunken Fisherman, a dive bar on the outskirts of town where the beer was cheap and the lighting was dim enough to hide the disappointment on a man's face. Jake was already there when I arrived, nursing a whiskey and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. That bad? I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. Jake pushed a manila envelope across the scarred wooden table. I'm sorry, brother. Inside were photographs. Sarah entering a luxury condo building downtown. Sarah with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who probably drove a Porsche and used words like synergy in casual conversation. Sarah kissing this stranger in the parking garage of the Marriott. His name is Richard Travers, Jake said. Rick to his friends. Real estate developer. Divorced, no kids, drives a silver Porsche 911, and apparently has a thing for married women. I studied the photos with the same detachment I'd once used to study enemy positions through a rifle scope. Emotional distance was survival. Breakdown later, when the mission was complete. How long? I asked. Best I can tell, about 4 months. They're not exactly subtle about it. 4 months. Right around the time Sarah started her mysterious book club. There's more, Jake said, producing his phone. I got this by accident. Wrong number text. The message was from someone named Marla. Coast is clear. Tom's working late and Lily's asleep. Have fun with lover boy. Marla, Sarah's best friend since college, the one who'd been encouraging Sarah to live a little and find herself for the past year. Apparently, she'd found herself all right. Tom's working late, I repeated. That's me. Looks like your wife's got quite the support network. I finished my beer and signaled for another. The alcohol wasn't helping, but it gave me something to do with my hands besides clench them into fists. What's your play? Jake asked. Good question. In the military, the answer would be simple. Neutralize the threat, complete the mission, protect your team. But this wasn't a war zone, and Sarah wasn't an enemy combatant. She was the mother of my child and the woman I'd promised to love. Though apparently, she'd had different plans. I need to confront her, I said. But smart. No accusations I can't prove. You want backup? I almost smiled. Jake had been asking me that question for 15 years, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the suburbs of Massachusetts. Not yet, but stay close to your phone. The next morning, I waited until Lily was at kindergarten before making my move. Sarah was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone and drinking coffee. She looked beautiful, as always, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing yoga pants and a fitted t-shirt that showed off the figure she worked hard to maintain. Looking at her, you'd never guess she was living a double life. But then again, the best operatives never looked the part. Good morning, she said, without looking up from her phone. Morning. How was book club last night? Fine. We're reading some romance novel. Pretty boring, actually. She glanced up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How was your evening with Lily? We read stories. talked about princesses and castles. You know, fairy tale stuff. Sarah's smile flickered. That's nice. I sat down across from her, my own phone in my hand. Sarah, who's Rick? The question hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Sarah's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally, defiance. I don't know what you're talking about. I placed one of Jake's photographs on the table. Sarah kissing Rick in the hotel parking garage. Sarah stared at the photo for a long moment, then looked up at me with eyes that had gone cold as winter steel. How dare you have me followed? How dare I? I kept my voice level, controlled. Sarah, you've been lying to me for months. You've been sleeping with another man while I've been home taking care of our daughter. You don't understand, she said, standing up and pacing to the window. You're never here, Ethan. Even when you're physically present, you're somewhere else, always thinking about work or the past or anything except me. So you decided to find someone who would think about you? She whirled around, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with, passionate, fierce, uncompromising. Yes, God, yes. Do you know what it's like being married to a ghost? You came back from the war, but you never really came back. There it was. The accusation I'd been expecting for years. The one I'd been afraid was true. So this is my fault? It's both our faults, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The marriage has been over for a long time, Ethan. We've just been going through the motions. I stood up slowly, my hands flat on the table. What about Lily? What about her? She deserves better than parents who are going through the motions. Sarah's face softened slightly. She'll be fine. Kids are resilient. Kids are resilient. I repeated her words, tasting the casual cruelty in them. That's your answer? Our 5-year-old daughter will just bounce back from her parents' divorce? People get divorced, Ethan. It happens. Not like this. Not with lies and betrayal and... I gestured at the photograph. This sneaking around behind my back? Sarah crossed her arms. What did you expect me to do? Come to you and say, hey, honey, I'm not happy and I want to sleep with other people? I expected you to act like an adult, like a partner, like the woman I married. The woman you married died somewhere between your second and third deployment, Sarah snapped. What came back was someone who needed me to be perfect all the time. Someone who never talked about what happened over there, never let me in, never... Stop. My voice cut through her words like a blade. Just stop. You want to blame me for your choices? Fine. But don't pretend this is about my deployments or my PTSD or whatever excuse helps you sleep at night. Sarah's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. This is about you being selfish, I continued. This is about you wanting excitement and attention and not caring who gets hurt in the process. You'll regret this conversation, Ethan. The threat was delivered quietly, almost conversationally, but it hit me like a physical blow. This was my wife of 8 years, the mother of my child, threatening me. I picked up the photograph and put it back in the envelope. Regret? Sarah, I haven't even gotten started. As I walked out of the kitchen, I heard her call after me. Where are you going? I paused at the doorway. To pick up our daughter from school. One of us should be there for her. That night, I was reading Lily another bedtime story when our lives took a violent turn I never saw coming. Daddy, what's that noise? Lily whispered, interrupting my reading of The Little Mermaid. I listened. Footsteps on the front porch, too heavy and deliberate to be Sarah coming home. The soft scrape of metal against metal, someone picking our front door lock. My Marine training kicked in instantly. Assess the threat, protect the innocent, neutralize the danger. Lily, sweetheart, I need you to be very quiet and very brave, okay? I whispered, setting the book aside. We're going to play a game called Invisible Princess. You hide under your bed and don't make any sound until Daddy comes to get you." Her eyes went wide, but she nodded and slipped under her bed without question. Smart kid. I moved to her bedroom door and listened. 2 sets of footsteps, moving through my house with the confidence of men who thought they had the upper hand. I heard one of them whisper, "Upstairs. Make it quick." They were coming for me. I had maybe 30 seconds before they reached the top of the stairs. My service pistol was locked in the safe in my office downstairs. Might as well have been on the moon. But a Marine learns to improvise. I grabbed a heavy glass paperweight from Lily's bookshelf and positioned myself behind her door. The hallway light was off, giving me the advantage of darkness and familiarity with the terrain. The first man reached the top of the stairs, moving cautiously, but not cautiously enough. He was wearing a ski mask and carrying what looked like a baseball bat. Amateur. I waited until he passed Lily's door, then stepped out behind him and brought the paperweight down on the base of his skull. He dropped like a sack of cement. The second man heard his partner fall and came running. "Tony! Tony! What the hell?" He rounded the corner and found me waiting. This one had a knife, which made him marginally more dangerous than his unconscious friend, but he was also panicked, which made him sloppy. "Where is he?" the masked man demanded, waving the knife in my general direction. "Where's Ethan Cole?" "You found him," I said calmly. "Though I'm guessing this isn't how you planned this conversation going." He lunged with the knife. I sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and used his momentum to drive him face first into the hallway wall. The knife clattered to the floor, and the second intruder joined his friend in unconsciousness. The whole thing had taken less than 2 minutes. I zip-tied both men with restraints from my security kit, then checked on Lily. She was still under the bed, eyes closed, following instructions like a good soldier. "The invisible princess can come out now," I said softly. "The bad guys are sleeping." She crawled out and hugged me tight. "Were they really bad guys, Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart, but they can't hurt us now." I called 911, then called Jake. By the time the police arrived, I had both intruders secured and a story ready. 2 men had broken into my house, apparently looking for someone else. I defended my family using reasonable force. Self-defense, pure and simple. Detective Ray Malone was the lead investigator, a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd probably seen enough domestic violence calls to be suspicious of any story that sounded too neat. "You're telling me you took down 2 armed intruders without getting a scratch?" he asked, looking from me to the unconscious men being loaded into ambulances. "I got lucky," I said. "Military training doesn't hurt either." "Uh-huh." Malone made notes in his little pad. "Any idea why they might have targeted your house specifically?" "No clue. Wrong address, maybe?" It wasn't entirely a lie. I didn't know why they'd come after me. Not yet. But I had a feeling I was about to find out. After the police left and Lily was safely asleep in my bed, her room being a crime scene for the night, I searched the belongings the intruders had left behind. In the pocket of the first man's jacket, I found a burner phone. The text message history was brief but illuminating. "Make sure he's scared. No witnesses. $5,000 when it's done." The number wasn't one I recognized, but I had ways of finding out who it belonged to. Ways that didn't involve bothering Detective Malone with inconvenient questions. I forwarded the information to Jake, along with a message. "Trace this number. I think we're about to find out just how far Sarah and her boyfriend are willing to go." His response came back within minutes. "On it. You and Lily safe?" "For now, but I don't think this is over." "It never is, brother. Watch your 6. I spent the rest of the night sitting in a chair by the window, watching the street and thinking about the kind of man who would send armed thugs to intimidate a father in front of his 5-year-old daughter. By morning, I'd reached a conclusion that would have made my old drill sergeant proud. If Rick Travers wanted to play hardball, I was more than happy to show him how the game was really played. Jake called me the next morning with information that confirmed my worst suspicions. The burner phone was purchased with a credit card belonging to Richard Travers, he said. Your wife's boyfriend just graduated from homewrecker to attempted assault. I was in my office, door locked, speaking in low tones while Lily watched cartoons in the living room. Sarah had come home that morning, taken one look at the crime scene tape on Lily's bedroom door, and immediately started packing bags. I can't stay here, she'd announced. It's not safe for Lily. What she meant was, it's not convenient for my affair if there are police hanging around asking questions. So Rick hired muscle to scare me off, I said to Jake. Probably figured if I was intimidated enough, I'd just roll over and let Sarah walk away with half of everything. Looks that way, though I'm guessing he didn't expect you to turn his boys into sleeping beauties. His mistake. I was already formulating a plan. Jake, I need you to do some more digging. I want to know everything about Rick Travers. Where he lives, where he works, what he drives, who he owes money to, what skeletons are in his closet. You planning something stupid? I'm planning something necessary. There was a pause. Ethan, be careful. You've got Lily to think about. I am thinking about Lily, which is why I can't let this slide. After I hung up, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down to think strategically. Rick Travers had made this personal when he sent men to my house. He'd threatened my daughter, violated my home, and tried to intimidate me into submission. He was about to learn why that was a mistake. But first, I needed to deal with the immediate problem of Sarah's departure. She'd announced she was taking Lily to stay with her sister in Connecticut until things calmed down. Translation, until she could figure out how to spin this situation to her advantage. Sarah, I said, finding her in our bedroom stuffing clothes into a suitcase, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, she said without looking at me. This house isn't safe anymore. Those men could come back. Those men are in jail. There could be others. She wasn't wrong, but her concern felt performative rather than genuine. Sarah had always been good at playing the victim when it suited her purposes. If you're worried about safety, maybe you should ask your boyfriend to call off his dogs. Sarah froze, a silk blouse half folded in her hands. What are you talking about? I showed her a printout of the text messages from the burner phone. Rick hired those men, Sarah. He sent armed thugs to intimidate me in front of our daughter. Sarah read the messages, her face going pale. For a moment, I saw genuine shock and fear in her eyes. He wouldn't, she whispered. Rick wouldn't do something like this. The evidence says otherwise. She sank onto the edge of the bed, still clutching the blouse. Oh my God. Lily could have been hurt, but she wasn't, because I was here to protect her. Sarah looked up at me with something that might have been the beginning of remorse. Ethan, I never wanted... You never wanted what? For your affair to have consequences? For your boyfriend to turn out to be the kind of man who threatens children? I didn't know he would do this. You didn't want to know. I sat down in the chair across from the bed, studying my wife's face. Sarah, you've been living in a fantasy where you could have your cake and eat it too, where you could sneak around with Rick and still come home to the safe, stable life I provided. It wasn't supposed to be like this. How was it supposed to be? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the blouse in her hands. I thought maybe you'd just let me go, that you'd be relieved even. Relieved to lose my family? Relieved not to have to pretend anymore. We haven't been happy, Ethan. Not really. Not for a long time. She wasn't entirely wrong. The marriage had been struggling since before my last deployment, but struggling didn't mean gone, and it certainly didn't justify what she'd done. So, what now? I asked. I don't know. Sarah set the blouse aside and looked at me directly for the first time in months. Rick says we can work this out, that we can find a way to co-parent without lawyers getting involved. Rick says. I kept my voice neutral, but inside I was calculating angles and distances, the way I used to calculate wind speed and bullet drop. And what do you say? I say I want what's best for Lily. Then you'll stay away from Rick Travers. Sarah's face hardened. You don't get to dictate who I see. I do when that person sends armed men to threaten our daughter. You don't know for sure that Rick… I stood up abruptly, cutting her off. Sarah, I found the phone. I traced the number. I have the credit card records. Your boyfriend tried to have me beaten up in front of our 5-year-old daughter. The words hung between us like a loaded weapon. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I walked to the bedroom door, then paused. I'm going to protect my family, by any means necessary. 2 nights later, I found Rick Travers at Murphy's Bar, a upscale establishment downtown, where men like him went to drink overpriced whiskey and congratulate themselves on their success. I'd spent the day making arrangements. Lily was staying with my sister in Springfield for the weekend, safely out of harm's way. Jake was positioned outside as backup, though I didn't expect to need him. This was going to be a conversation, not a war. At least, that's what I told myself. Rick was easy to spot. Tall, well-dressed, sitting at the bar, nursing a scotch and scrolling through his phone. He looked exactly like the kind of man who would steal another man's wife and then send thugs to clean up the mess. I slid onto the bar stool next to him and ordered a beer. Rick Travers? I said casually. He looked up from his phone, and I saw the moment recognition dawned in his eyes. He'd seen my picture, probably on Sarah's phone or in my house during one of their secret meetings. Ethan Cole, he said, trying to sound confident but not quite managing it. I wondered when you'd show up. Did you? That's interesting. I took a sip of my beer. I was wondering when you'd grow a pair and face me like a man instead of sending hired muscle to my house. Rick's face flushed red. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of the burner phone and the text messages. Your credit card, your phone, your messages. Want to try that again? Rick stared at the phone for a long moment, then signaled the bartender for another drink. Look, that got out of hand. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. How was it supposed to happen? They were just supposed to scare you a little, make you realize that fighting this divorce wasn't worth the trouble. I set my beer down carefully, using the movement to control my temper. They threatened my daughter, Rick. They weren't supposed to involve the kid. But they did, because you hired cheap muscle who don't follow instructions very well. Rick took a large gulp of his scotch. Sarah said you were being unreasonable about the separation, that you were making things difficult. Unreasonable. I repeated the word, tasting the irony. I found out my wife was cheating, and I'm being unreasonable for not just rolling over and playing gone. Look, these things happen. People grow apart. Sarah and you what? Fell in love? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rick, you're a midlife crisis with a Porsche. Sarah's bored and looking for excitement. This isn't some great romance. It's 2 selfish people who don't care who gets hurt as long as they get what they want. Rick's face was getting redder. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know that Sarah's been lying to me for months. I know that you've been sneaking around with a married woman. And I know that when things got complicated, your first instinct was to send armed men to intimidate me. I leaned closer, lowering my voice to the tone I'd once used to coordinate sniper shots across enemy territory. What I don't know is whether you're stupid enough to try something like that again. Rick tried to meet my stare but couldn't hold it. His hands were shaking slightly as he lifted his drink. The divorce will go through, he said. Sarah's already talked to a lawyer. That's between me and Sarah. But you and I have our own business to settle. What do you want? Good question. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Or just the satisfaction of watching this man squirm? I want you to understand something, I said. Those 2 men you sent to my house? They're facing charges for breaking and entering, assault, and attempted kidnapping. When they get tired of sitting in jail, they're going to start talking. And when they do, your name is going to come up. Rick's face went pale. I never told them to hurt anyone. Tell it to the judge. I finished my beer and stood up. One more thing, Rick. If you ever, and I mean ever, do anything that puts my daughter at risk again, I will end you. Not legally, not financially, not professionally. I will end you. Are we clear? Rick nodded rapidly, unable to speak. Good talk, I said, and walked away. But as I reached the door, I heard Rick call out, "This isn't over, Cole." I turned back to look at him. He was standing now, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. You're right, I said. It's not. Outside, Jake was waiting by his car. How'd it go? About like I expected. He's scared but not smart enough to back down. What's the next move? I looked back at the bar, where Rick was probably ordering another drink and trying to convince himself he was still in control of the situation. Now we wait, I said, and we get ready for whatever stupid thing he does next. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Jake called with news that Rick Travers had made his next move, and it was even stupider than I'd anticipated. He's hired a lawyer, Jake said. Not just any lawyer, Margaret Chen, the shark who specializes in custody battles. Word is, he's helping Sarah build a case that you're an unfit father. I was in my office, reviewing security contracts and trying to maintain some semblance of normal life while my world fell apart. On what grounds? PTSD, violent tendencies, the home invasion incident. They're going to argue that you're dangerous and unstable and that Lily isn't safe with you. The irony was breathtaking. Rick sends armed men to my house and somehow I'm the dangerous one. There's more, Jake continued. Sarah's been talking to her friends, building a narrative. Marla's been spreading stories about your anger issues and how Sarah's been afraid of you for months. Marla, Sarah's loyal friend and co-conspirator. I should have seen that coming. How long do I have? Emergency custody hearing is scheduled for Monday, 4 days. 4 days to save my relationship with my daughter. 4 days to counter a narrative that painted me as an unstable veteran who couldn't be trusted around children. Jake, I need you to dig deeper into Rick's background, and I mean deep. Financial records, business dealings, personal history, everything. Already on it. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Rick Travers is about to learn why you never start a war with someone who's better at it than you are. That weekend, while Sarah was at Rick's condo planning my destruction, I was planning something much more comprehensive. Jake had provided me with a detailed dossier on Rick's life, and it made for fascinating reading. Richard Travers, 38, divorced real estate developer with a history of questionable business practices. 3 previous relationships with married women, all of which had ended badly. A tendency to use intimidation and legal threats when he didn't get his way. And most interestingly, a pattern of financial irregularities in his development projects that had somehow never quite risen to the level of criminal charges. But the real goldmine was his ex-wife's divorce filing, which Jake had managed to obtain through his contacts in the legal community. Jennifer Travers had accused Rick of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and adultery. She'd also mentioned his habit of recording his encounters without his partner's knowledge. Rick, it seemed, had a thing for insurance policies. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, perfect weather for what I had planned. The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m., but I had business to take care of first. I found Rick at his office, a glass tower downtown that screamed success and ambition. He was in a meeting with potential investors, presenting plans for a new luxury development on the waterfront. I waited in the lobby until the meeting ended, then followed Rick to the elevator. "Ethan?" he said when he saw me, trying to sound casual but failing. "I heard you might be stopping by." "Did you?" I pressed the button for the parking garage. "That's interesting. Almost like you were expecting me." The elevator doors closed, leaving us alone in a small metal box 30 floors above the street. "Look," Rick said, "this doesn't have to get ugly. Sarah and I are trying to handle this like adults. Adults? I nodded thoughtfully. Is that what adults do? Hire lawyers to take children away from their fathers? Sarah's concerned about Lily's safety. After what happened at your house, what happened at my house was your fault. Your hired thugs, your credit card, your brilliant plan to intimidate me into submission. Rick was sweating now, despite the air conditioning. I told you, that got out of hand. A lot of things are about to get out of hand. The elevator reached the parking garage and the doors opened. Rick's silver Porsche was parked in a reserved space near the elevator, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Nice car, I said. Must have cost more than most people make in a year. It was a gift to myself. Success has its rewards. I walked over to the Porsche and ran my hand along the hood. You know, Rick, I've been thinking about our conversation the other night, about how this isn't over. What about it? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. It was Rick and Sarah in a hotel room, clearly taken without their knowledge. Sarah was in lingerie, Rick was shirtless, and they were both obviously engaged in activities that would be embarrassing if they became public. Rick's face went white. Where did you get that? Your ex-wife was very helpful. Apparently, you have a habit of recording your conquests. Jennifer kept copies of everything when she divorced you. That's illegal. Invasion of privacy. Is it? I'm not a lawyer, but I think the legality gets murky when you're the one who made the recordings in the first place. I swiped to the next photo. This one showed Rick with another woman, clearly not Sarah. This was taken last week, I said, while you were supposedly helping Sarah plan our custody battle. Looks like you're already lining up your next conquest. Rick lunged for my phone, but I stepped back easily. Military reflexes don't fade, even in parking garages. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. You're going to call your lawyer and tell her that Sarah has changed her mind about the custody case. You're going to stop interfering in my marriage and my relationship with my daughter, and you're going to disappear from our lives. And if I don't? I smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then these photos get sent to every real estate blog, business journal, and social media account in the city. Your investors will see them. Your clients will see them. Your mother will see them. Rick was shaking now, whether from rage or fear I couldn't tell. You're also going to compensate me for the damage your hired thugs caused to my house, I continued. And you're going to make a generous donation to the local veterans organization. Let's call it $50,000. Consider it the cost of your education. I don't have $50,000 just lying around. Then sell the Porsche. I put my phone away and started walking back toward the elevator. This is blackmail, Rick called after me. I paused at the elevator doors. No, Rick, this is consequences. You wanted to play games with my family, so now we're playing games with yours. The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside. One more thing, I said as the doors began to close. If you ever come near my wife or daughter again, these photos will be the least of your problems. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a courthouse conference room with Sarah and our respective lawyers when Rick's attorney called to withdraw the custody petition. Sarah looked confused and angry, but there wasn't much she could do without Rick's financial support. That evening, I picked up Lily from my sister's house and drove home. Sarah was waiting in the driveway, her car packed with suitcases. It's over, isn't it? She said when I got out of the car. The custody case? Yeah, it's over. I mean us, our marriage. I looked at the woman I'd loved for 8 years, the mother of my child, the person who'd tried to take my daughter away from me. Sarah, that was over the moment you decided Rick Travers was more important than our family. She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. I'm sorry, Ethan. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. Sorry for the affair? Or sorry you got caught? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Lily can visit you on weekends, I said, but she lives here with me. Sarah got in her car and drove away. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner, then went inside to make dinner for my daughter. Later that night, As I was tucking Lily into her bed, back in her own room, the crime scene tape finally gone, she asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Daddy, is Mommy coming back?" I sat on the edge of her bed and chose my words carefully. "Mommy's going to live somewhere else now, sweetheart. But she still loves you very much, and you'll still see her lots." Did I do something wrong? The question broke my heart. No, Princess. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes mean families have to change. Will we be okay? Just you and me? I kissed her forehead and smiled. We'll be more than okay. We'll be great. As I turned off her light and closed her door, I reflected on the events of the past week. Rick Travers had learned the hard way that some battles aren't worth starting. Sarah had learned that actions have consequences, and I had learned that sometimes the only way to protect the people you love is to fight for them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Heard Rick's Porsche is for sale." Funny how that worked out. I smiled and typed back, "Consequences can be expensive." "What's next for you, brother?" I looked around my house, my home, where I would raise my daughter and build whatever came next. It was quiet now, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. "Now I focus on what matters," I typed. Everything else was just noise. Outside, it had stopped raining. The storm was over.